Hi everybody. I thought I'd have a little quick cup of tea break, and as usual, I'm reading and thinking. And I wanted to bring you something because I get a lot of people take my words out of context because they don't know my long story, so they see the short version and they reply angrily to believing that I must be some sort of, Muslim lover or some sort of anti-Australia or something like that. And it's not my job to explain to them, but what I do is I use it as an opportunity to make sure that the limited time that I get to be in front of people for the purposes of sharing information that might eventually shape us back into a culture which I believe is worth fighting for, I just like to stay neutral as I can, albeit in the peaceful country that I've lived in my entire life, and not pick sides, just tell you what stats say. So a lot of people are saying about immigration being the problem, and to me, screaming that immigration is the biggest problem in this country is, at the moment, is testament to the fact that you don't know anything about your country. So if that's your screaming point, you know nothing about your country. And if you've only started screaming about it in the last 6 months, you're a fearful racist who's really hiding your distrust for Muslims after Bondi. That will get more hate, but at least it will plant the seed in you to stand for what you believe in. If you don't like that religion, that's fine. If you don't want that religion in your country, that's fine. You have a mechanism inside of your constitution to call for a non-secular government under Section 116. Have your elected officials stop blaming immigration because you started caring about it when some brown people shot some white people in December last year. Stats show the truth. 6% popularity for Pauline Hanson's One Nation in November, 22% in January. What changed in the middle? Mainstream media fear campaign based on an event that happened in December. Now, I don't care if you want to be that way. I don't care if you love your religion so much that you want to denounce others in this country. That's fine. But like I said, stop talking shit and saying it's about immigration, because all you'll do is you'll miss the real target somewhere along the line. Call it for what it is. Say that you're scared. Say that you don't want brown people to shoot white people in this country, and have a non-secular government where the government can decide to shape the nation based on its religion. Because we were supposed to be a Christian faith-based nation. And the reason I say that is because I just get berated with people telling me how much Muslims want to kill all of us and how many they've killed. And I'm always like, okay. The extreme end of the Quran is horrible. What they do to women is disgraceful, and what they do to children is disgusting. But let's have a look at some figures, just for relative figures, right? So there has been only 250,000 reported deaths from Muslims, probably outside of their own countries. They would kill a lot more that wouldn't be reported to the West. But remember, we only get Western media, and we know who runs Western media. So take a breath, because only 100 years ago we lost 60-odd thousand soldiers in World War One, and the motto of the Anzac is "Lest we forget," and we already did. So the fact that they're still fighting for what they believe in long after major events in their timelines for their countries probably tells you they give more a shit about their religion than we do. But let's not pass judgment, because I don't have a favoured religion. I live a closer life aligned with Christian values than I do to anything else, I would say. But I also know that those books have been what killed endless amounts of people. The Catholicism spread around the world killed millions of people to have their religion installed. You know what I mean? To have their religions installed, the Crusades killed millions of people in a time where it wasn't even able to be reported properly. So how many were lamed, maimed for religion? Because somebody didn't believe in something you did. And so power is struck by belief. And if the only reason someone starts to believe what you believe is because you'll cut off their head if they don't, then did you ever really build a foundation of true belief? Or did you just build a subservient army of sheep who can't or wouldn't question because they saw what happened to the person beside them when it did it? And so we talk. I'm just talking about history. If you look at a timeline of AD, if you just read AD, right, forget about even before that, just AD. If you just randomly go with your belief anywhere along that timeline and go and have a read of history, you might be the good guy. But you might get unlucky and go, and you're the bad guy. And some have seemingly been always the good guys and always the bad guys since their inception. But I promise you, at some stage, if you are based on religion with a book in your hand, your people have killed a lot more people than what we're currently dealing with. So I don't want to argue from a religious standpoint. I don't want to argue from an extremism standpoint or an ideology. I've never had anyone in my family killed by someone who killed on the basis of colour, creed, race, religion, ideology. And so I'd imagine whoever I identified with that person as would no longer be a person killed my family. It would be a colour, a race, a religion, an ideology would be all locked into that. And therefore in my trauma, every person that was a colour, a race, a religion, ideology would be my enemy. Because I could see that over and over because of the trauma point of what had happened. I'm not taking that away from anybody. I'm saying that I'm a man, living, breathing man. I'm married to a beautiful, living, breathing woman, and I have four beautiful, living, breathing female children. They are the most important things to me, with my beautiful mum, living, breathing mother, right? Lots of women, if you don't think karma's female, trust me, it is. My life is 6 of them. But my job is to defend them, so I get it. I get how we get trapped into these things. But these things all started with somebody saying you had to believe what somebody else did. And a gang of people started overpowering other people to believe what somebody else did. And so today, when we talk about Muslims overrunning and raping and doing all these things, that is still brought to us by Western media. So I'm always going to be a little bit mindful of it, right? Because if you see the rape down the road and there's 10 men standing around and there's a rape happening, I'm pretty sure that 8 men down the road here are going to stop it from happening. And they're going to make the person doing it do that. But if the stat says there's 250,000 of them happening, well, that means it must be pretty obvious. There must be something happening that people are turning a blind eye to, or there's something happening in the mainstream media that's telling you that a certain type of thing is happening. Now, I've heard all over the country that these gangs are stalking, these things are happening, and shit's getting wild. But I ask, are they operating out of being a man and a woman, or are they operating on a hate that was bred into them by a book? Because an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. America, since taking the majority of the power of the world through the petrodollar in 1944, has bombed over 20 countries. And I was like, let's have a look. Let's have a look at whether they were all Muslims, so that we could sort of identify whether or not there was a bit of a theme. Well, there's a theme above the power, but there's not a theme of who they're bombing below the power. So in terms of, there was China, North Korea, Guatemala, Indonesia, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Cuba, Lebanon, Grenada, Libya, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Iraq, multiple times, Bosnia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Serbia, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, and Syria, with a wide race of anything from Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, all the way through them. So I'm all for identifying racist, extremist religions that cause death in countries that shouldn't. This country, for example, and someone just said, why bring that war to our shores? Well, isn't it a funny thing to say, why bring that Middle Eastern war to our shores when we've been funding and partaking on behalf of the Americas for 100 plus years of going to their country to bomb those people out of submission? In Japan, after the white flag was waved, 250,000 people from the atomic bomb. In Korea, from the Korean War, right, civilians, 2 to 3 million civilians killed in the Korean War from bombing. In Vietnam, 65 to 73, 1 to 3 million deaths of civilians, all American. Laos, 50,000 from a bombing campaign, right? 20,001 hit from a munitions place blowing up. These are civilians. Cambodia, 150 to 500,000 deaths from US bombing alone. 1.2 million deaths not from directly from bombings. So just from bombings in Cambodia in 1969, America up to 500,000 deaths, civilians. Iraq, 25,000 to 100,000 deaths, counting with the ongoing conflict of the people in the time of there, over 200,000 violent civilian deaths. Studies exceed 600,000. Afghanistan, 240,000 deaths of soldiers and civilians. Libya, 100,000. Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, Syria. Drone strikes, where we stopped sending soldiers to kill people and started doing it from computer-based. All of that there is Palestine, 72,000 deaths in response to the October 7 stuff. Palestine has 50 out of the 70,000. 8,000 of them are reported as being Palestinian fighters. 55 to 60,000 of them are women and children and civilians. So it's all good to be on the Christian side of Christianity when you choose the time in your timeline to say that Muslims are trying to take over the world and Muslims are the reason why we need to stop the immigration coming to the country. If you believe that Muslims are the problem, then have a referendum under Section 116. Stop talking about immigration holistically, because you're lumping in so many good people with some extremists. There is 33% of this country wasn't born here now. And to say that they are all a problem, I mean, Big Choc talks about it a lot. What would have happened when his parents, who adopted him from Colombia, when he was adopted from Colombia, what if they had went to get a child, to bring child back, and they said, no, sorry, we're not allowing any new people into this country at the moment? Some of the people that are out there, their parents, 2 generations ago, their parents were immigrants. And today they want to say, no, immigration's a problem, it's got to go. I'm not saying it's not a problem. What I'm saying is, when it's conflated with fear, anybody will say whatever they need to stop being fearful. I genuinely believe that this country woke up to immigration numbers when the Muslims shot the Jews at Bondi. That's what the statistics show. That is why the biggest outgoing tide of liberals out of their party that has ever happened, and they had to go somewhere, and so they've gone to One Nation because they fear. And shortly after that, it's possible to say whatever you want about a Muslim in this country, denigrate, degrade, say whatever you want about a child or woman, but do not say anything about Jews. In fact, anything that is considered anti-Semitic by the new laws. And so why do I say that? Well, 4% of our country is Muslim, 0.4% of our country is Jewish. As a representation, only 6% of our parliamentarians are Muslim, of 4% of our country, but 14% are Jewish in our parliament. We do not have a special envoy to the Muslim religion, but we have a special envoy to the Jewish faith. So when the control of Zionism, for example, is sitting up here above our politicians and pushing down into the legislation of the politicians and heavily funded, and around the world, the Christians and the Catholics have contributed to some of the biggest ongoing atrocities of human sacrifice for religion, for the supposed cause of stopping the rise of communism. Right? How long until our country becomes that? Because when you read the story of the alternate story, the non-Jewish story of Hitler and the rise of his power, he had Jewish people all around him. He had Jewish friends. Hitler didn't necessarily kill the Jews, remember. His soldiers did. So what have you got to do to nationalise yourself so much that you would kill a certain type of race in your country that's supposedly taking it over? Well, you've got to be instilled with fear. And so national dominance, nationalism, socialism is what the basis of his party was, making Germany great again. You hear that? Making Germany great again. So if history is to repeat, then are we seeing the rise of these national forces using fear as a tactic to have the Goyim kill each other? Because remember, the media that we watch, the movies that we watch, is all designed out of things like Operation Mockingbird for the media stuff. It is MK Ultra. It has all been tested at a psychological level. And who made it? Who made all of those MK Ultra play? German scientists. And how did they get their hands on them? Well, they grabbed them at the end of the war. So we're in the middle of one of the longest running back and forth propaganda campaigns against men and women to completely control our minds, because my wife says, if you don't control your mind, someone will. And so again, I say, I do not care. If you want to have a referendum tomorrow to say that this country is non-secular and that we want to be a Christian faith base, what I'd ask, well, Christian and Catholic, even though the 1701 Act of Settlement, the Queen Victoria scenario from 1900 says that we are Christian and bans Catholicism under the Imperial Crown, bans Catholicism in England under the Church of England, and then the son of which is the Anglican Church of Australia founded. If that's what you want, then that's fine. But call it what it is and stop lumping all immigrants into this immigrants bad. Because I promise you, you'll find out just how just how dumb we are in a lot of ways for believing whatever the mainstream media puts in front of us, for believing that America has saved every country from communism and every country from... Tell me a country that is currently doing better as a result of America. Statistically, you might be able to come up with one. Out of the 20 countries that I just read to you that have been bombed, out of the tens of millions of people that have died at the hands of the American Christian faith base, fighting for freedom, fighting to stop it spreading around the world, tell me the countries that are better. Look at their own financial state. Don't get into the Trump argument. Let's just do 100 years of which he's been in charge for 6. 94 years of Western Christian power. Is that what you would want to be remembered as? Is that what you would want to be remembered as? The side that killed tens of millions of innocent civilians to protect us from communism. What is communism? The Amish, I believe, by definition, would be communists. Because again, even the definition of communism has been salted by Western media. And you read into the relationship of America and China when America picked China up with the petrodollar, and you'll understand how China really got to be the powerhouse it is. America helped it. So was Chinese rise through vile communism, or was it from the West using it as an external place to build all the cheap shit that they wanted to sell with their fake funny money off the back of no fiat currency? History will show you over and over again that the mainstream media, who we know owns the mainstream media since the days of the printing press, has filled your mind with propaganda that has made you act, think and talk a certain way without you even really knowing it. And that was me. I grew up in a town with 4,000 people. Maybe 10 of them were Indigenous. Everything I really thought I knew about the Indigenous of this country through my teenage years and into my youth, right, was from a newspaper or from the TV. And not until I went to Ingham, above Townsville, and I met the real Indigenous people, the real families that had been there since the Italians had shown up and taken the land given to them by the government and displaced even the last of the ones that were still up there living around, locked them up for stealing a loaf of bread, locked them up for rape, and both went to Palm Island. Rapists, murderers, drunks, and thieves all went to the same place. Not that long ago. When I read their story, and when I talked to a young boy, his name was Chris, lovely young fella, 18-year-old, great kid, Indigenous boy. We used to always come in the pub to play poker, and one night I heard them say, "Who are we waiting for?" And they said, "We're waiting for Chris Kachinda." And I said, "Not a fucking chance." And they said, "What?" And I said, "Chris Kachinda's banned from here." No, I hear a voice. "That's me," the young fella says. And I said, "What do you mean?" Realising that I didn't know Christopher's last name, he said, "I'm Chris Kachinda Jr." And I'm like, fuck. He goes, "It's all right, bro. I've lived with him my whole life. His old man was one of the most notorious drunks in the town, had been banned from everywhere. His tag-along missus was the most toxic, vile piece of work, drunk thing that you'd ever get your mind on, starting fight and punching people all the time. But that boy had no chance. Not only did he share the last name, but he shared the first name. Now, I'm not looking for sympathy for any particular race, creed, colour here. What I'm telling you is there's always a story that elevates the reasoning why people would judge other people. And I did, and I was always doing it. Still do. But not from the basis of fact or knowing or history of hate because someone had done something to hurt me. Because I'm constantly barraged with this need to hate those that aren't me, my need to use ignorance for my lack of tolerance for somebody that might believe something different to me. And I really can tell you now that statistically, the amount of people that the Bolsheviks killed, they were Christian, Jews, and Muslims, and they were communists, right? Tens of millions. How many did the Catholics kill? Millions, at a time where there wasn't millions. How many have the Christian faith-based nation of America that we are big brothered to, we have an AUKUS agreement with, we send our troops to go there when they go somewhere, we still are actively supporting them in combat right now. How many millions and millions of civilians have died in the last 100 years? Not even that, 80 years. How many? So the fact that the media presents you with the most horrific killing deaths of the Islamic extremist regime does not, in my mind, justify to me that I would look at a Muslim daughter, a Muslim wife, and say, you toxic head-cutting pieces of shit, get out of my country. But if you want to, then do so. Have a referendum. Section 116 needs to be altered so that the politicians can make it happen, because just saying it out loud as people doesn't make it happen. You need law to regulate that, and you'll have to do it under the Constitution, which is your power, Section 128, the power for the people to have a referendum to change the outcome to be a non-secular nation, so that we can say no to Muslims, because you can't say it any other way. Now, if you want to just lump everybody in that is an immigrant that's coming into this country and fuck them all off for the chance that some of them might be secret Muslims, then do that. Mark said Australia is full of Catholic with Protestant couples, for sure, because they don't know their history. They haven't read the history of the English succession of removing the Catholic Church of Rome, anything to do with Catholicism or Rome, out of the country that founded ours. In fact, there is a papal bull still issued, one of the highest bits of paperwork that the Pope can issue. There's still a papal bull issued by the Vatican that says the Anglican Church is heresy. The Christian faith-based nation of our country still has an active papal bull from the Church of Rome, from the Vatican, saying that Christianity through the Anglican Church is heresy against God. And we're worried about another religion taking us over, another religion getting rid of the foundations of our country. And I'm like, you just don't know your history, as I didn't, because I didn't care for it, and I still don't, because the reality is you're still controlled by the media narrative. And if you want to be scared of the brown people that shot the white people, that's fine too. Fear is okay. You can say that out loud. But to say that 800,000 Muslims in this country are extreme terrorists here to take it over, probably because they pray publicly, because they pray more often, because they believe in their God and their religion, I bet you haven't read it. I bet you haven't read the Quran. And I bet you haven't read the Talmud either. I bet you haven't even read your Bible. But you're making decisions based on mainstream media, and we know that it was a false flag. What is a false flag? Real people die, but the people who got the blame are not the people who orchestrated it. So if you want to start a war with Christians versus Muslims in England, London, here, America, if you want to justify continuing to have 20 countries bombed and millions and millions and millions of people killed as civilians around the world, if you want to have the leftovers of that country free to move to the West where they're safe, because we know we never ever bomb ourselves in our own countries, then partake and stop thinking of people as human. Stop thinking of people as men and women. Just treat them like the system treats us, because Goyim is how we are all seen. All of us. Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. It doesn't matter to them. Even the Semites. Because we know that the Jews that we have in this country are not Semites. They are not of the bloodline that they claim to be. But it's just a word, just another word created to use against us. Anti-vaxxers, racist bigots for that. Because we allow mainstream media to play off our emotions over and over again. When the stats show, if you came to a planet in your spaceship and you said, we want to know who is the most violent, aggressive, murderous people in these modern times with international law guiding the way we look after civilians, Geneva Conventions, Nuremberg Conventions, Hague Conventions, UN charters, right? Internationally recognised how people are to be looked after for civilian status. And the aliens were like, okay, that's what we want. We want to look at who do we want to get rid of the most violent, murdering people, the people that have killed the most people against all of the international rulings that have everybody has peacefully come together as independent sovereign nation states. Who would it be? And the data will tell you it's American Christians. Now, because they did it with the gun, with a declaration of war, and it wasn't a hatchet job. But guess what you don't see on the mainstream media? Guess what you don't hear about, other than the backwater whistleblower Ben Roberts-Smith type cases, which again flare up emotion, almost like it was designed specifically to come at the time after the Desi Freeman incident, after the Bondi incident, the same year in 1 month's time, where David, what's his name, the whistleblower that actually released the Afghani files that he got jailed for, David McBride, he's up for parole for the first time in 5 years. He's up for parole in month and 2 days. Don't reckon that will be another mainstream talking point, that the guy that brought the files forward that showed all of the deaths and killing of the civilians, that they're trying to don't think that was just timing, good timing? Don't think that the movie knows what's going on? You don't think that they're controlling every single thing we do by telling you who's bad and who's good? And you watch it and you absorb it, and then you see someone down the street that fits the emotional demonstration of what the mainstream media, funded by a certain type of people, tell you what you're supposed to hate. Why is it that we can talk about Bolshevism and freely discuss Stalin and Lenin and Mao in China? Why is it that we can talk about all of the war, why in all of these countries? Why can we say freely so many things, but try and have a public discussion about Nazi Germany and Hitler? Try and have a public discussion or forum or debate about that and watch how long it lasts. Why? Try and have an alternate view other than the one that's presented to you. Because you can have one on Bolshevism, you can have one on communism, you can have one on Taoism, you can have one on Christianity, you can have one on Catholicism, you can have one on every event in history that statistically had more deaths. The Vietnam War has more deaths. The Korean and Vietnam War together have more deaths. You can talk about it all you like. You can do your thesis on it in university if you want to. But you can't go to one point, and one establishing point that allowed Israel to exist. Now I'm starting to get a flavour that is not neutral. because you would think that I'm talking about Jews, as someone yelled at me yesterday. Why don't you just say fucking Jews? One, because the Jews that they're referencing are true Semites, and most of those Semites, by definition, live in fucking Palestine. The bloodlines of the research I can do tells me that Ashkenazi and Khazarians are not the true bloodline that is spoken about in their book, very conveniently. But regardless, Zionism is an ideology of political agenda over and above. And when we say we're worried about Muslims taking over our country from underneath, but we're not even remotely worried about legislation and top-down power from Zionism above, then you're a moron who's stuck listening to mainstream media and mainstream social media. And that's got nothing to do with religion. That is literally saying you don't watch mainstream media, yet you're fearful of what Tommy Robinson and such are telling you, who are mainstream media people, because mainstream media is talking about it, and Carl was mainstream media, right, up until the fact that they supposedly sacked him, let him go, so that they could bring you that information about how terrifying it is for the 250,000, the 250,000 rapes or whatever, so that you can be on edge and actually do nothing about it. You will do nothing about it. It's the same as the people that tell me all the time I need to talk more about the pedophilia problem in this country, and I say, done. I'm ready to go. Where are we going? Where's the first place we're going tomorrow? Because you've done so much research, you know what it is that's going on. Where are we going? Now, Muslim gangs and stuff like that. Sure, we could, we could probably point out some pretty bad neighbourhoods in Melbourne, for example. We could probably get together and go and sort that shit out. But that's what the fucking army used to do in Townsville when the Indigenous got out of control. The army would sweep through there and sort the shit out. So why is that not happening? It's almost like this country wants it to happen. It's almost like it's a narrative from certain people who treat us all as goyim to make sure that we kill each other. Because if you can look past the fact that there is a man or a woman standing in front of you, if you can look to an ideology that tells you that you're right and they're wrong, if you can attach the evil extremism of those people that exist in every type of religion, if you can attach that to that person in front of you, you can have them killed without even blinking an eyelid, because they are no longer men or women of this planet. They are a creature, a creation, a useless dog turd, disgusting, vile, extremist piece of shit, while they're going, I came to this country to escape that shit. But I was 40 years old when I escaped. I grew up with the religion. Have you read the book? The book doesn't say we're going to kill everybody and take over. The book says the same as your thing. It says that if you don't worship God, you're going to go to hell. So we sort of think similar things. Remember that Muslim religion is just a part of Christian religion that didn't accept a different Messiah for the time being. I mean, there's not a lot of difference. It's just another book. It's just a book that took a little detour and ran almost parallel. But because they killed each other over which book was real for so long, that now we don't even know what the books say anymore. We just know that you're supposed to hate you and you're supposed to hate you and he used to hate you and they might hate you. But at the same time, legislation is getting passed over the top of it to make it possible. So, if anybody wants to argue the stats, if anybody wants to say to that alien that came in and asked who is the most violent, murderous people, you would have to say that the military-industrial complex of America is, in the last 100 years, the most violent, murderous people controlled by politicians who are controlled by something. Whether that's controlled by greed, power, money, Christianity, or Zionism itself. But I tell you, if you want to be a statistician and actually go and have a look at the stats, There's no fucking way that you'd be worried about Muslims. You'd be worried about fucking America. But then you go, oh, well, we're friends with America. Until you fucking aren't. Now, we can't turn our gaze to America. But if you read the history of China, and you read the history of what China was like before communism straightened them out, and then you have a look at the social economic outcomes of Chinese communism, and they are fitter than us, smarter than us, healthier than us, have more savings than us. But Western mainstream media told us that they are completely under the subversion of... And I'm like, yeah, I know what Western mainstream media says. And yes, I know that communism exists. And yes, I know that it's fucking shit. It's just as shit as Muslim religions. North Korea and all of those types of places. North Korea and China, when the power gets too powerful, they move forward. But again, every country that has that happening to them outnumbers their fucking military and outnumbers their policy officers by fucking, in this country, 100,000 to 1. In that country, millions to 1. Because we're not seen as people, and we don't see each other as people. Therefore, we don't see our strength, because we are so fractured and so divided that instead of being a single picture, we see 40,000 pieces of a puzzle that don't seem to fit together. And this one doesn't fit. This one doesn't work. This one's not the right colour. This one doesn't go in. This one's not the right angle. Let's bash it together and fit it in. I just think that of all the things I've learnt in this fast awakening process that I've been, of opening my eyes and reading history and reading the propagandist machine that has been in charge since the paper press came into play, and reading the one-sided biased news reporting of what potentially could be one of the biggest murdering campaigns of the New World Order, particularly in the last 100 years, and then listen to that same media say that the saving grace for all of us has been slaughtering all of those countries around the world to stop them from taking over America. And I'm like, how so? None of them have ever invaded you. None of them have ever struck on your land. And then they're like, yes, they did 9/11. I'm like, I think it's pretty clear who 9/11 was done by. And it wasn't the two fucking passports that survived the explosion that just happened to land on the side of the street, identifying who it was that was flying. I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge to, and I certainly know that I'm a good person to stay in the middle, because I wasn't brought up with religion, so I'm not tainted to one side or the other. I wasn't brought up with religion. I wasn't brought up in a dictatorship family where someone was dictating to me the way that we had to act or whatever. And I haven't had anyone killed in my recent generations that would make me more biased towards them. And if and when that ever happened, because we let this country go, then I'm sure that I would be able to understand why other people hate other people because of what happened to them as they grew up. I'm sure that the lady that was abusing me yesterday because she had suffered domestic violence at the hands of someone who was 1/8 Muslim country, like not even a type of country, like 1/8 of their family used to be a Muslim religion, right? Patricia Tasker said Romans, Catholic Church, Vatican, Zionists are responsible for killing the most. It's not Americans, but the underbellies. That's what I'm trying to say, the military-industrial complex, right? I'm trying to say that, saying that it's just Americans. But Americans cheer their armies. Americans clap the bombing. And Americans are voted primarily to always go to war. Vietnam was probably one of the only ones. And at the moment, they're not happy about Iran. But what I'm saying is they know that they partake in a system where their money, their tax, their minerals, their resources goes towards one of the highest per capita debts in the world, so that they can continue to bomb people out of existence. And that stats that I read out says that it's got nothing to do with Muslims, it's got nothing to do with the Middle East, it's got nothing to do with anything. It's about power, control, oil, and the spread of empire. And every empire that has spread and killed as viciously as Rome did eventually got so big they got killed, got wiped out, got destroyed. Maybe they packed up and they went to London and Britain, and spread the United Kingdoms out so big, so huge, and became so powerful and got too big and came back in. And maybe they picked up and they went with Freemasonry or secret societies, and maybe they went to America. And they did their thing again, where they killed and maimed and took power and spread so big everywhere. And if they're at the end of their time, if they're in the death throes of the next change that will come, where will they go? What will they do? Or are they just trying to rebuild themselves in America at the moment under the technocratic power of you can't trust religions anymore. Everybody hates everybody. People are fallible. Congress is... parliamentarians are flawed, legislation is too malleable, people are too stupid, industry is too slow. We need AI systems to run everything because you can trust them because they're not sentient and they don't have emotion or the history of all of the religions killing each other. You need them in charge. Go and read The Technocratic State by Elon Musk's grandfather, 1910. Go and have a look at the map that I showed the other day of Trump's new Trump's new Board of Peace next to the Technocratic State. Right? Go and have a look at the two maps side by side. Go and notice the Roman reef of the UN wrapped around both, which is still the Roman Vatican symbol of succession and win. Go and have a look at the change from the 33 pieces in the UN. Go and have a look at the number and see if it means anything. And go and have a look at the fact that it was a Gleason's flat Earth map in the UN, and now it is a round map, a round Earth map, but it mirrors exactly, nearly to the inch, with the Technocratic State. Who did Trump take with him to his inauguration in the front row? All of the technocratic heads. Who did Trump take with him to China the other day to navigate and negotiate all of the minerals and resources and batteries and equipment that they need for their data centers? All of the technocratic state. All of the technocratic leaders, all of the big banks, all the BlackRock, all the Vanguards, all went with him over there so that they can set up for the age of Aquarius, which means there's a change. There's a financial change, there's a power change, so they can set up the new biodigital convergent world where all of the infrastructure that's being built, that was built for climate change, is human free. Once you have windmills and once you have solar panels and once you have automation, then the power is not necessarily coming from coal, which is still heavily reliant on people. So if you build your data centers now they're all transitioning and saying we're going to build data centers, and data centers need so much water, there is nothing environmentally friendly about them at all. So it's time now to stop talking about climate change. It's time to install leaders that say climate change is bullshit, because they don't want you to look at the fact that now they've done the work, they've set up their power structures, they've set up their networks of energy as they transition to their data centers. But they've got you running around worrying about immigration and brown people bad because you're not yet in control of your brain. If you don't control your brain, someone will. And that can be through subtle, that can be through advertising, it could be through mainstream media, it can be through gatekeepers, Judas goats, whatever's in front of you. Don't believe me. I always give you the stats that are easily Googleable. People are like, oh, you're a fucking Google researcher. I go further than that, but I give you what is right there in front of you in your computer, because if you're going to try and debunk me as an average Aussie, if you were smart enough to have the detail of what I am, what I'm talking about, you wouldn't be watching me because it would be so fucking boring. You'd be watching Brendan O'Connell or something like that. because listening to me would be just to someone who's got the knowledge higher than that. You'd be listening to Brendan O'Connell, where he'd be breaking it down to you in a very, very specific level. Okay? So I do it based off what I'm talking about mostly is Googleable stats. What I think, it'll probably be a hell of a lot worse than that. But that way, any person out there that wants to talk and wants to actually go and have a look for themselves to start forming their own basis, so that the seed that I just planted inside of you, you have two choices. You can look and think it's bullshit. You can call me out on whatever it is that you know that I don't, from your traveling around the world and what you've seen and all of the different stuff, because I'm a stat guy. I'm doing it by stat, and I'm doing it by source energy, not by emotion. I'm connected to my heart when I'm looking at someone in front of me as a person, as a kid, that you would have killed as long as they were in bomb shot of potentially an extremist. You would blow the legs off children and women as long as it took out that extremist that you think is going to big dip. Makes sense? It's hard. It's hard to be a critical thinker because there's so much free information. There's so much free information that the cost of that information is your life. The cost is your thought process. The cost is your ability to critically think your way through a situation to move away from where the masses are going. Because if you find yourself in a massive march towards something, you're possibly a fucking lemming, yeah? And you're possibly going to the edge of a cliff. And when it starts moving and you're in the middle of it, you can't get off it. That's it. Because popular politics at the moment is what's guiding this country. So if you say things that are popular, you can be in charge. It doesn't have to have any founding in law. It doesn't even have to have any founding in statistical data. Brown people bad. Get rid of immigration. Don't worry about the good ones. Get rid of them all. Don't worry about the ones that are here. Yeah? Just stop more coming in, they say. Fine. Vote. Use your tool of this so-called powerful constitution that you want to, and establish the fact that you are a non-Muslim country. Have a non-secular government, and then watch yourselves argue over what you are. Oh, well, we're Christian, faith-based, as determined by our founding document, the UK 1900 constitutional covering clauses that gave us our 1901 Constitutional Act. It is Christian, faith-based through the Church of England, granting their rights through the... And all the Catholics say, what? No, that's not what we want. And the 30% of the people that are here in this country right now that weren't born here, ranging from 1-year-old to 100 years old for all I know, 30% of the country might argue and say, hang on. Kane said, been watching you for a bit now. What is your opinion of Alex Jones and David Icke? Too much to talk about in here. If they're famous, if they're rich, if they've got mainstream publicity and coverage, then somewhere along the line they've sold their soul to someone. Is that a better something than what you've got currently? Possibly. But we spend so much time externally looking for someone to validate the position that we are internally that we forget the fact that the most powerful tool that we've got is self-belief, and self-awareness governs that. And so when you have self-belief and when you have your stomach turned on, like the video that I did this morning about Emotion 101, when you have your gut discernment turned on, when you have your heart open, and when you have your intuition flowing, and those three things in a physical state are working through, you don't have to think about what people are or who they are. You only have to watch everything and use that ability to either absorb that information or just observe it. There's nobody out there that's not worth observing, because the goal of disclosure is to always give you enough information at a time when you're looking for it, when you're ready for it, and then the universe watches you do nothing with it, because that's the goal of it, is that you eventually get to a stage where you know and do nothing. That's why they have to tell you, because then the karmic problem sits with you. because you know that it's free will for all of us to be partaking in this and allowing this to happen. And when you do nothing and change nothing, then the universe says the karmic debt sits with you, not the person that puts the inversion in place for you to partake in. Right? It is the alcohol that you put in your body. It is the drugs you put in your body. It is the gambling that you partake in. It is the sexualization that you do. It is the cheating. It is the stealing. It is everything that is anti the religions that you say that our nation is faith based on. It is the laziness, the apathy. It is the unlearning of our past. It is the forgetting of our Anzac. It is all part of that. And you are trained and told by other politicians that this politician is the problem, not you. And so if you vote for this politician instead of this politician, then something might change, and it never does, and it never has. You might get more benefit as a trust situation, beneficiary, because that's what we are in. We are beneficiaries, not owners of this commonwealth that has been sold. So watch all of the people. I can't tell you the amount of different people that I've watched over the years, and eventually they have no more information for me to offer. Tony Sayers, Sayers, taught me everything about reincarnation, taught me everything about energy states, it taught me everything about near-death experiences, taught me a lot about the astral and the false grid that has possibly held us here in that world. So many times I watched him, and I can't get any more information out of him. My brain expanded, and his information was a stepping stone, so I don't watch him anymore. It's not because I would tell you not to watch him. It depends where you are on your journey. Alex Jones's information has been valuable for me at different layers of it, listening to how they construct it. Whitney Webb, fantastic resource. Ian Carroll, I love watching him. Brendan O'Connell, I listen to him all the time. If I can go back in time to listen to Stephen Spires when he wasn't so bitter and he was focused a little bit more on the information rather than the sledging, like I'm starting to turn into him, then he's great. Romley Stewart, Justinian Deception, wonderful. There is plenty of people out there that don't require accolades or millions of dollars or fan followings to give you all of the information that you'll ever need. Do not think for a minute that you have to be a high-powered, big, high-flying executive type like those people, the Ikes and all that sort of stuff, famous people, that they're the only ones with knowledge and true information. You've just been fed that by your algorithm. You've just been given that by the very people who run the mainstream media and mainstream social media. So that is the question, is how did you find that information? John Smith said gatekeepers can still provide valuable information. Information is only useful to you if you have the intent to do something with it. That's it. Don't worry about who gives you information. Worry about what you do with it. Because if your strategy is to take in information, do nothing with it, and then give that information to other people so that they might do the same, then that's what they want. They want stagnant. They either want anger, where you run towards the enemy, shooting your gun, not even being able to see who you're shooting at, just anger finally got the better of you and you run like Desi, just shooting because you've had enough. That's easy, knock you off. Or you stay fearful from the energy and you back away from the information that you've got because you realise how big of a problem it is and you feel so tiny, and yet on voting day you feel big enough to partake so that collectively you can make a difference. And I'm like, that's the same power that you had every day of the years in between two votes, that collectively the people have the ability to be the change of this nation. So I'm not telling people to not watch or watch. When I call out the grifters and the shills and the Judas goats, I'm trying to remind you on which angle it is that you're watching them, because you'll find yourself drawn as a victim. You'll find yourself drawn to people who pat you on the back for being a victim and tell you that it's okay, it's not your fault. And that is a good feeling when you don't have self-awareness and self-accountability, and you don't have self-love, self-worth, right? It does feel good to have someone say it's not your fault. It's all the government's fault. It's communism's fault. It's Fabianism's fault. It is all of these things. It's the Jews, it's the Muslims, it's not your fault. It feels good, and we will clap them and say thank you, Sam Bamford, thank you, Big Chalk, thank you, Shallow Chow, thank you, Michael, thank you, Hoodie. Continue, please, to say out loud that it's not my fault and I don't have to change to do anything about this, because that makes me feel wonderful. Thank you, Bozy, for telling me that I can sit and watch and trust the plan for year after year after year while my country slides and burns. Thank you. Because I really needed to hear that I was the victim, because being a victim is easy. To become a victim, you don't have to do anything. Someone starts perpetrating against you. To stay a victim, you have to do even less, except know that you're the victim and tell everybody that the perpetrator is the reason that you're a victim. And then you can either be saved from the perpetrator, or the perpetrator can finally feel so guilty for victimizing you that they might give up, or a new perpetrator might come along and take over because they're like, their last one is bored of victimizing you, or has died, or has moved on, or it's a different nation, or it's a different government, or whatever it is. But you, luckily, as the victim, do not ever have to do anything other than to continue to remind yourself through the people that you watch on media that you are a victim. And that's the biggest problem in the freedom movement in this country, is that most of them had the head start from COVID, like I did 6 years ago, and have stayed exactly where they were from the day that it happened, because they are watching and continuously watching people who I believe are deliberately put there to make sure, and that you don't have to do anything about that, and that somebody will come and save you. Jesus will come and save you. White hats will come and save you. Voting will come and save you. Someone is going to come and save you, because you are the victim of some horrendous crimes. And that is true, but I wasn't going to stay there, because it was my lack of knowledge, it was my lack of awareness, it was my own ignorance and apathy that put me in the position for someone to start victimizing me. And I was like, I ain't fucking hanging around for someone to get me out of that situation, so I didn't. So I read and I learn and I question and I take the heat from saying the uncomfortable things out loud. And sometimes it's egoic, and sometimes it's narcissistic, and sometimes confidence can come across as arrogance. That's everybody. But never lose sight of the fact that that doesn't mean that face to face I would want you dead because your beliefs are different to mine. I might want to punch you in the face, but that's a man, and that's okay, right? Oh, good one, Boro. Boro said the Palladians are coming. I forgot about the Palladians. I'm sorry. The Galactic Command Starship is inbound any day. I think they're all coming at the same time. The more these timelines go along, the more they actually converge. I've heard so many of these, the white hat leaderships, have started to say that they're also galactic commanders under Trump, who's now he's reborn Jesus. So it's like Jesus, Trump leading out the white hats who are in behind, that are all star seeds sent here by the Palladians. And I'm like, this is beautiful. I mean, oh, Christ. I just wish I could have learnt all that 6 years ago, so I could have saved around about 4,000 or 5,000 hours of listening and reading. That would have been so much better for me if I could have just saved all those hours of reading and learning, right? It's difficult, I get it, and I'm doing it from a blank slate, which is why I do it why I've been doing it for so long to out in this social media world. But it's also why now it's time for me to retreat into behind my own private platform. Right, that's why I built the private platform. The people said they wanted privacy, they wanted no ads, they didn't want to support social media, they said they didn't want to be tracked, they didn't want cookies, they didn't want that public information to be used against them in courts. So I did build it for that reason, so that you can go in there. There's seven videos of mine in there today of interviews of different varying remedies, lots of different information in there. You can go in there, you can work on your balance of spiritual, physical, intellectual, financial, emotional. You can hold yourself accountable and start getting yourself to the point where you're not in this irrational, responsive, fight or flight, fear, low vibrational state where you're always arguing or always running, and never actually learning or embodying or changing what it is about and what we need to do holistically as a nation to become a centered, grounded, middle-based world of no extremes of left or right, just equality for all people that live here, that want to live here. And if you want to define what that is, do it through your legislation. You have the ability to do so. Doesn't work out for a lot of countries that do, But if something fills a gap, that means that the gap was created by who? You. If we were so apathetic about our religion and our belief and our basis for all of the years of football, meat place, kangaroos and Holden cars, right, then we created a gap through our own lethargy that has supposedly been infiltrated by Muslims. So if you want to go back to being the Australia that wouldn't have that gap, start acting like you're Australian. Start understanding what it is. Yeah? Start understanding what it is that allowed the gap to be filled by somebody else's religion or somebody else's people. And maybe, just maybe, we could stop bombing the fuck out of all of those countries that caused the refugees to need to look for somewhere else that would stop doing it. Why do they go where they go? Because they're like, well, there's a fair chance I'm not going to get bombed by the people that are bombing me if I go to America and Australia. So let's go to America and Australia because they're not likely to bomb them fucking selves. But if I stay where I am with the small amount of tiny percent of extremism that goes on, yeah, then I'm probably either going to get killed by my own regime or bombed by the people that are trying to kill the extremists. So what a fucking world to live in, right? And what a world for the vibrational, low vibrational state of this planet to try and keep itself with 8 billion fucking people constantly now connected to the social media world, this digital world where all of that angst can be hyper extended all day, every day. Turn it off. Get outside. Shit happened. We can still smile. We can still smile and move on because we know shit happened, but you don't have to carry the weight with you. And it's easy for me that it happened, but I don't ever want it to happen. And so that's why I defend the country as it is. But unfortunately, the inconvenient truth of what I say for a lot of the time might seem uneducated, but it is exactly the average AF person that I say that I am. Just an average Aussie looking at it critically without the indoctrination that a lot of you have had to unpack and unwind, without the education that a lot of you have had to unpack and unwind. So take it for what it is. I'm just another talking head online. I've just got a different angle to most. You will get offended. You will get upset. It won't gel with you all of the time. But I'm not here to make you walk, talk and act like me. I'm actually just trying to get you to think outside of what the mainstream media, controlled by certain people, have showed you what is right for your entire life. Your entire life, every movie has been about American glory. That's it. It's not what to think. It's how to think that we're missing. There's plenty of fucking people that'll tell you what to think. I'm only trying to encourage you how to think, because we fucking don't know how to anymore, because common sense is no longer common. It's just sense. Catch ya.